okay, this is going to be a little weird. Can I call you Christopher? Should I call you Mr. Ward? Because you
Oh,
have
no.
been a mentor and an inspiration for me when it comes to doing
Oh,
entertainment interviews for you. I've told you this many times.
thank
You,
you.
Mike Williams, all the folks from the original Much Music,
Yeah.
and of course Brian Lanahan, who is my one of my all-time favorites. You
Yeah, he was the
guys,
detail guy, wasn't he? Yeah.
the detailed guy, you guys were really the folks who really helped me explore and figure out how I wanted to do interviews with artists and celebrities, because you guys were honest, you did your research, you came out with stuff where the celebrity would look at you and go, how the hell did you know about that? Or else they just start talking and there's talked about stuff that maybe they weren't supposed to talk about, but because you guys were so good and made them so comfortable, you pulled
Thank
it
you.
out. Thank you so much for all of those great
Oh,
times.
Rudy, those are exceptionally kind words. But you know what? We started from the same place that you did. They hired us because we were music lovers, not because we were broadcasters. They hired us because we were passionate about the music we were playing. And I think that's how you make a connection with your audience. So,
Yeah, definitely. Because of course you're a singer, songwriter, musician, all of these things, and we're going to be talking about something that you've done, which I think is amazing, especially because your vocals, my friend, ah, beautiful.
oh,
But
this is, thank you. When I feel down, I'm going to play this interview back. Okay.
definitely do that. But it still, I got to ask just a couple of quick questions about the back in
Yeah,
the day with Much Music and everything else. When you
sure.
think about those times in the creation of music videos, the way the 80s had really transformed into its own entity, because the 60s were one thing, the 70s were one thing, the 80s were almost like a combination of the 50s, 60s, and 70s, but then gave this new techno feel to it. And it didn't matter if you were black, white, whatever, mute. People were listening to all different types of music, and
Yes.
it did
Yeah.
not matter what the race was or what the music was considered. Everybody was playing everybody, and everybody was dancing with
Yeah.
everybody. There was unity.
You're right. It was an explosion in variety, and it was such a great time for the Canadian music in particular because we'd been kind of like rock nation up until about the 70s, right? And then it just exploded, and suddenly, you could turn on the radio and you'd hear everything from Glass Tiger to Jane Siberry to the Parachute Club to Loverboy. It was just there were no limits anymore, and I mean, Much was a part of that story. I think what we did best was we gave people an opportunity to reach an audience instantaneously. So many artists that I talked to, I remember talking to Gowan or talking to Jan Arden, and they'd say, my life was kind of going along, and then you guys programmed my video, and I couldn't go to the grocery store. And I mean, that doesn't sound necessarily like a good thing, but that kind of exposure is part of an industry growing up and, starting to feel its oats kind of thing. So.
What was it like for you and Mr. Roberts, JD Roberts, to bust through that wall to introduce Much Music, oh, is it the nation's music station? That's it.
That's what it was. Well, it was funny because we were standing behind the wall waiting for the moment to start, right? I think we were kind of concerned that we weren't going to be able to bust through, that the cardboard was going to be too powerful. So we put a slit in it with a penknife. But also, I'm claustrophobic, so I was not happy being behind that board at all. I was really happy to bust out. And if I looked overjoyed, that was the reason why.
I always have a lot of people because I've been blessed to be able to do this for 30 years.
Wow.
And a lot of people always ask me, who's your favorite interview? And who's your least favorite interview? This is
Right.
the first time I'm going to get a chance to ask a legend like yourself, who was your favorite interview? And who would you say would be, say, maybe your least favorite? And if you don't want to give a name, at least give what the experience was.
Well, among the favorites, Rudy, you'll know this because you've talked to so many people yourself. There are ones that you love for different reasons.
Mhm.
I mean, the most momentous moment in my career as an interviewer was the day that George Harrison sat down knee to knee with me for an hour on live television. because I'd been preparing for that interview since I was about 13. So I was ready for that one. But it was still an awesome experience. Or when I interviewed Leonard Cohen, because, he'd been such an important part of my childhood, reading his poetry and all of that. And I was terrified, but he was so gracious. In terms of pure raw star power walking in the room, and it's just like, a million watt presence, Tina Turner. Oh my goodness. She just smiled and everything was sort of levitating in the room. And, those kind of things, I mean, I'll carry those with me for the rest of my life. Yeah, there were bad ones. There were some people who misbehaved, who were, who just acted like they were just above it all. And it's like, oh, do I really have to? Just so, you're so tiresome kind of expressions. One of the rudest ones was, I don't mind telling you his name at all, was Mark Knopfler when I interviewed him. And I was a fan, and I still am. But I interviewed him on the stage at Wembley Arena in London just prior to the Live Aid concert at Wembley Stadium. And so they asked us if we would do the interview on the stage. And I thought, well, that's a great set. That'll look fantastic, right? And we got there and we kind of, said hello. And he was standing on the stage and he didn't turn around. And he didn't turn around. And it was just so awkward and weird. And then finally, it was almost like it was like sort of like talking to a John Cleese idea of a rock star. It's like, and he sat down and he's going to kind of roll his eyes when I asked questions. There was nothing that I could do that was going to save that moment. But he also he wasn't happy with the lighting. And so he turned on my cameraman and said, can't you fix the lighting here? We're going, this is Wembley Arena. We have no control over the lighting whatsoever. But never mind. So I don't know. He was, you know what? I'm going to say he was having a bad day and he took us all along with him.
Wow. I'm just going to add, for me, all-time favorite will always be Barry White.
Oh, yeah.
And I would say least favorite, even though I have interviewed him 5 or 6 different times, 3 times were good, but it was the 2 that were bad that wanted me to put my foot up his rear, Gene Simmons.
Yeah. I wrote a book about Much Music the early days called
Yes.
Is This Live? And the first chapter that most people turn to is the worst interviews chapter. And I canvassed all of my coworkers to say, which one just really got under your skin. And the winner, ladies and gentlemen, ding, was Gene Simmons. More people. I mean, Laurie Brown tells the story of, and I guess she kind of walked into it by asking him, what he really wanted from women. And his answer was, I want them to lick the bottoms of my boots. It was just so gross. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the things that we have to do. But the thing also is too, you always, and all the folks at Much always kept their composure. They always continued. It's something I don't see a lot today, and not knocking the new interviewers of today. I just find that there's very much a difference. What would you say the difference is for yourself and what you see in what's happening today with interviews? I mean, for me, one of them is the fact that because we have this type of platform, everybody and anybody feels they can do interviews. Whereas you and I, love of the industry, learned through our craft, we made mistakes, we did all these things before we got out there.
When we first started, it was a huge turning point in how artists were brought to the public. Because you figure, the shows that were popular when Much started were like, Midnight Special and Don Kirshner's rock concert and stuff like that, right?
Yes.
And so those were not really like revealing a whole lot about the artist. But then, when MTV came and the new music in Canada and Much, we were going into the dressing rooms and we were going backstage and we were getting on the tour bus and we were getting the inside scoop. And I think a lot of artists responded really well to that because they could tell their story more completely. Some considered it an invasion, and that I certainly understood. But but it meant we really had to know our stuff. We couldn't just go in there and go, so, and how's that tour going? And expect that that would be enough. We had to research. And I know you do the same thing. It's really easy to tell who has done their homework and who hasn't.
And if I can interrupt, that research wasn't picking up your phone or your laptop to get that information. It was literally magazines, talking to other people. Like we had to search for this information.
We had a giant filing cabinet. So when I was interviewing Tina Turner, I just stole the Tina Turner file and took it home that night. But you know what? The thing about Much too that distinguished it from a lot of other outlets was that it was live. It was all live and full chaos, full on seat of the pants television. And so, wacky things were bound to happen. It was baked into the style of television that we did. And I loved it.
And I'm going to ask you just one more question. What was the
Yeah.
craziest thing that happened live that you were involved with? That's the other thing I miss because Much Music used to show like maybe 10 or 50 minutes of all the wacky stuff that would happen. And, it could be with Poison and somebody saying something crazy and they're too busy laughing and falling over each other. What was the craziest thing happened with you?
There were a bunch. I'll give you a couple. I'll tell you briefly. Latoya Jackson, I was interviewing her, and she had the Jackson style, the very breathy voice, and sort of this sparrow-like kind of presence. She's very sweet. And we always did interviews in different locations in the space, but also in the building. For whatever reason, we were underneath a giant fire bell, like the old school, those great big things that would be on the wall. Well, of course, you know what happened during the middle of the interview. The fire bell went off, and it was really loud. And I could tell that she just kind of froze in position, right? And I'm having done this a million times. I'm just sitting there kind of waiting for it to end or waiting for somebody to turn it off or whatever. And she looks at me, she goes, "Is there a fire?" I said, no. "Is this live?" I said, "Yes." And the guys on the floor are going, "Should we go to video?" I'm going, no, let's just wait this thing out and see what happens. And Daniel came over and he had his leather jacket on, and he hung it on the top of the fire bell. So it went from going clang, 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 clang to for the rest of the interview. Anyway, so that was a little nutty. The other one was when Motorhead came in. For some reason, I got asked to host the Power Hour that day, which was not my genre, as you probably know. And they said, "Oh, well, Motorhead are going to be your guest hosts for the show today." I'm thinking, okay, that should be interesting. And they came in, each with their own 26er. Lemmy had his bottle of Jack, um, and the interview just deteriorated like right from the beginning. It just got completely out of hand to the point at the end I'm giving away a life-size Motorhead poster, and while doing so, the boys in the band came over and ate the poster live on TV. So, yeah.
Oh, do you miss those days? Do you miss them?
Well, you got to grow up sometime, and you got to move on sometimes. Sure, I mean, writing the book, like recalling all those kinds of things, and then just dipping into everybody else's memories. I mean, Steve Anthony brought his own wheelbarrow full of wacky moments, as you can imagine. I mean, there was one where he was doing the Christmas tree toss off the roof. Remember they used to do that every year? Yeah. And he kind of went at it a little hard, and he had the tree, and the weight of the tree pulled him, and he rocked over top of the bar, which was right above the parking lot. And Mike, the cleaner who was helping him, grabbed his heels from behind and probably saved his life.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I will say it again. I miss those days of the creativity, the anything can happen live. I just miss all of that. And when you talked about we all have to grow up sometime, the thing that you never stopped doing was still writing music and performing. People, I think, forget that you are a songwriter.
Well, I kind of forgot it myself sometimes, Rudy. And just because, well, that isn't true. I mean, I've written out throughout the years for different artists, people like Diana Ross and the Backstreet Boys and Amanda Marshall and Colin James. And, all these people have covered songs of mine, which is like a great gig. But I did kind of lose sight of writing from the point of view of being an artist, of just telling your story through a song, which is the, kind of for me, like the ultimate form of expression. And that's the thing that I rediscovered a couple of years ago, and that I brought to making a new album.
And let's go into this new album. What's this album called? And you kind of gave it before, but I want to go into it a little bit more. The essence of this album and how it represents not just you today, but you from back in the day.
The album is called Same River Twice, which is an expression from the Greek philosopher Heraclitus from 400 BC, because who else are you going to call, right? I mean, there's no no plagiarism issues with him, apparently. So it's the expression is you can't step in the same river twice because it's not the same river and you are not the same man. So it's all about constant change, and it's about accepting and dealing with who you are now rather than who you maybe once were or who you were hoping to be, um, but not in a heavy-handed way, in a storyteller's way. And it was a blast to do it because we were right in the early times of COVID, and we were going, are we going to be able to do this? Because I wanted to cut it live off the floor in the studio where all the players are in one room and they can see each other and play off of each other. I mean, that's the way to get the best performances, is to have something special, something magical happens when players interact with one another, and they'll do something that surprises them. You'll see that spark of joy on their faces when that moment happens. And increasingly, that has not been available to us. First of all, by choice, because technology has moved front and center in the creative process, where people relish doing that, where they're recording digitally, they're stacking up parts like little increments and then passing it on to somebody else to add their increment. But this was determinedly old school, Rudy. It was like they did it in Motown. It's like they did it in Muscle Shoals. Plus, I wanted to go in without the players having heard the songs. And they were like, really? I went, yeah. So I had an acoustic guitar. I'd just run the song down. They'd make some notes about the structure of it, and then we'd start running it down. And once it felt good, I mean, we'd press record, and then we move on to the next song. And it was truly a joyous experience for me, and I believe it was for the guys as well, because it was like they were coming out of hibernation. I mean, everybody's been hiding away, right? I mean, yes, they've been continuing to work, as I say, working digitally from their own little workstations, but it's not the same as playing, you know? So that's kind of the spirit of this record.
I saw a video of you performing Black Velvet. I was curious if that was on the album, and for folks who may not realize, why is that song so special for you?
Pardon me, you ended sooner than I
No,
thought
no,
you were
no, no,
going
it's
to.
okay. I'm gonna do the same for with you too.
God. I thought it was a longer question. I thought, okay, I got a chance for a second, but apparently not. Yes. Well, Black Velvet is absolutely a special song for me. I wrote it for Alana Miles, who does the absolute definitive version of the song. I mean, I don't think anyone will ever top that. I mean, there's other versions that are good, but hers just heart and soul captures what that song is all about. But I thought, I thought about doing it, and then I thought, no, I shouldn't do it. And then the guys I was working with went, oh, don't worry, you're doing it. It was like, okay. And so we had to find a different vibe for it. So I tried to go back to how it felt when I first wrote it, which was like quiet on acoustic guitar, just, the boom, 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 and just doing that for a long time until Mississippi, until the lines started to fall into place, right? Now, Alana makes it a torch song, but mine is like a storyteller's version. And it's quiet. Well, partly because I can't sing like that, but, uh, yeah. So, I mean, it was daunting to take on a song that everyone knows one particular way and try to say, hey, maybe there's another way to experience this song, the way that it felt when I wrote it. So.
What is that like for you when you write a song a certain way, like Black Velvet, and then when you turn on the radio, you hear your song, but it's done in a different way? Is it pleasurable for you? Is it like, no, that's not the way it's supposed to be done? or is it just like, hey, I'm getting royalties, they can do whatever the hell they want to do?
Rudy, I think it's a healthy combination of all of the above. I mean, with Black Velvet, I was part of making that record. I mean, I was the executive producer on that album, so I was there for every session and writing all the songs with and for Alana and with David Tyson, her producer, and my co-writer. So we crafted all of that as an ensemble. So when it came on the radio, I was thrilled, but not surprised.
Mm.
But I have had other songs where I've written them one way and they've come out. I'm going, what song is that? Wait a minute. And you'll go, I recognize those words. Hold on. And you just have to kind of be open-minded. And it's like the process of writing the songs. If you get really attached to an idea and one way of doing things, if you get kind of precious about it, that will stop the creative flow. And I think if you can bring that openness to listening to things as well, you'll have a richer experience of them. And you know what? If somebody records my song, whatever they do with it, it's really flattering. And yes, there hopefully are royalties.
Just curious, have you heard your song sampled for a hip hop track or anything like that?
No. I thought for sure that somebody would sample even just the opening riff of Black Velvet, the do, the bass riff. But as far as I know, it hasn't happened.
I think we're giving somebody an idea.
Okay.
So we got to wait and see what happens.
Thank you.
You're welcome. But in the meantime,
Thanks for the mail already.
as 2021 is rolling along, are you going to perform any of this on maybe a virtual stage or anything like that?
I don't know. That's a bit of a leap, and it's something that I haven't had to really kind of deal with or determine. I miss performing, but I'm a little further along on my storyline, and whether the rigors of the road would work for this old guy or not,
We're talking virtual, though. You don't have to leave your house.
Well, yeah, there is that. I don't know. I'm just taking it one step at a time. I just wanted to make the record, and that was a challenge, And then, and just going out and talking about it, as you said. I mean, the zeitgeist has changed completely in terms of how people do interviews, and in a way, maybe it's swinging back to the more detailed interview. I mean, how many times would you have a conversation like this one, say, even 5 years ago? There wasn't time for that. It was like you want to get in, get out, get on with it, whereas, we get to be fairly expansive in our thoughts and, it becomes like a real conversation as a result. So, going out and talking about the record and just, all I really want is for people to hear it and hopefully they'll enjoy it and hopefully it'll contribute to their lives in some way. But that's my humble wish for it.
I wish the same for you.
Thank you.
One of the questions I love to ask legends like yourself, if we could go jump in the hot tub time machine and go back just before you and JD Roberts bust through that wall, and we just had a moment, and the you of today could talk to you before going through that wall, what advice would you give the young you of then?
Enjoy every last moment of it, because you can't step in the same river twice.
Truth. You speak the truth. And advice for the young folks out there who are, whether they're songwriters of today or doing what we've done over the years, that is interviewing artists on these different platforms, what advice can you give them?
Well, for the interviewers, I would just say, first and foremost, your most important skill is to listen. Listen and take what that person is giving you in the moment and, respectfully return it to them. As for artists, I don't know that my advice really counts. I think artists are the kind of people that have to discover things on their own way. There's always going to be a reinvention of the wheel when you're writing songs and creating music. And that's just exactly as it should be. It's not like because I've been doing it for a long time that I sort of have a corner on the market of knowledge. I don't. Um, and I honor somebody who's, 22, who's just doing it with all their heart and soul and, moving people emotionally in the process. I guess it's sort of the same advice is just enjoy it. Um, Try not to get too caught up in the quest for fame and recognition. And if you do things for the right reasons, it'll probably work out okay.
Again, you speak the truth. Christopher,
Thanks.
thank you so much for this interview. Thank you for the music.
Mm.
Thank you for the great memories. But as a personal note for myself, thank you for shaping my career in such a great way. It's funny, and I want to add this in. We're cleaning, the family's been cleaning out my parents' house, and they found what I call my 80s box. And it was like a
Cool.
time capsule
I
where
bet.
I found my a letter from Humber College from 1983 saying I'm accepted into radio broadcasting.
Oh, how great.
Um, Cards, and I even found negatives, and I'm looking through them. It's all everything in this box is 80s.
Wow.
Everything. The thing that I wish was in there, and I'm hoping what I can find, is my Much Music t-shirt that I bought from the Bay to wear when I went to school. That's how much I loved Much Music. I loved what you guys were doing. I didn't realize I was studying what you guys were doing when it came to interviews, but I was captivated. And it took years later for me to turn around and say, that's what I want to do. And it's because of what you guys did. Thank you so much for that.
Oh man, your words are too kind. I really appreciate it, and thanks for your friendship and time today.
Thank you again. Oh, social media, something we would never have talked about in the 80s. Where do people go to follow you to see everything that you're up to?
Well, there is, let's see, ChristopherWard.ca, my new website, which will be launching next week.
Congrats.
And on Facebook, you can go to the Christopher Ward page and also on Instagram. Uh, I'm supposed to have my answers together right away, aren't I?
No,
Where's
because
my list?
those are perfect because everything else, websites and everything else usually have all the
Oh,
other
you know what?
stuff.
I did something fun that I bet you would enjoy. It's like an 8-part series on the making of the record because we had a camera
Oh,
person come in for a couple of days. So it's just little snippets of a couple of minutes in length, but you get to see the players jamming out the songs and hey, what do you think about this? And yeah, I think you'd find it fun.
where do we see that? Off of what
That's
platform?
on the Facebook page on Christopher Ward.
As soon as we're done, I'm going to go check it out. I got to see this. Christopher, again, thank you so much.